being able to be, I guess, in charge of your own destiny, I think that is what I've really come to appreciate, and that is the closest thing that I could define as success for me. If you think about how expensive it is to be poor, um, like you can't engage in any of the wealth building, cost
Yep.
saving strategies that we all might think of. It's like you can't do that if you're literally every week back at zero. It's very empowering being in the driver's seat, and saying, there's nothing over here. We're going to build something. And
Yep.
it's that magic of entrepreneurship that I never really knew existed. If you care about something, just run at it at full pace and see what happens. Because you could end up changing the world. And the only people that change the world are the people who act on their ideas and see them through.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. I just have a favor to ask before we begin. If you've been enjoying these conversations and want more stories that redefine success, please do us a massive favor and hit the subscribe button over on our YouTube channel. It literally takes 2 seconds to do and is completely free. It's a small gesture, but it makes a massive difference for us as it really helps us to grow the show. And with that, let's get into the episode. All right, welcome back to the Quest for Success podcast. And thanks so much for tuning in once again. Today on the show, we're really, really excited for this one because we're joined by Danielle Schutte, who is the CEO of We Are Mobilize. And for those of you who haven't heard about Mobilize, it's an Aussie charity, really, I suppose, trying to tackle homelessness in a very people kind of first approach. Really keen to dive into your story, Danielle, and understand how you got to where you are today. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So, Danielle, this podcast is all about success. So, we need to start with a very fundamental question. And that is, what does success actually mean to you?
It's a huge way to kick off. And I think the reason why it's so big is because it's kind of changed a lot over the years. And it is also interesting that it's a relative feeling or a relative measure, for me at least, rather than some absolute that's going to stay constant throughout life. I think for a long time, I was really hung up about kind of achieving as much as possible, and like the kind of metric that you can use to try and reflect that is like, how much money am I making, what's my title, all those sorts of things. Um, and it's a very like hollow sort of definition of it, and it sounds so cheesy because so many people say this sorts of things. But it really is true. And the only way you can kind of realize it is once you're on the other side. And I guess all this is a preface to say, like, my journey into Mobilize was kind of a little bit not scary, but it felt big and it felt like a risk because I had to redefine, or I had to really sit there and think about like what I wanted for my life and my career. I, was a few years into my career. I'd gone through management consulting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a big girl job in federal government, and, looking after or working at a multi-billion dollar agency and seeing kind of big rooms and that sort of thing. I had parents. So I was the first in family to go to uni. And so I had
Wow.
parents being like, you go to uni, you get your office jobs, you climb the ladder, salary is important, those sorts of things. And about 3 years in, I ended up having to sit down with them and say, I'm actually gonna just like basically throw it all in and start a homelessness charity. And they were just going, what? Like you're just kind of in the trajectory, or you're just kind of seeing that curve really accelerate. And so it was interesting, and I think it comes back to that definition of success, where I realized that going to work every day or waking up every day, so even if it's outside work, waking up every day and genuinely not feeling like anything is work, genuinely
Mm-hmm.
just having so much fun and being so mentally stimulated and obviously living comfortably and that sort of thing, but just like being able to be, I guess, in charge of your own destiny. I think that is what I've really come to appreciate, and that is the closest thing that I could define as success for me. And I'm
That's
interested to see how it might change in future. But yeah, I think I've hit a really sweet spot for me where I'm like, I don't, there's nothing to achieve. It's the process of doing the things, and it's how fun life can be, and the challenges, and learning to enjoy that ride. So
So
yeah, not a
yes,
not a
so it's like
specific,
appreciating the moment, like appreciating what you have today. Is that what you mean? The success?
not even necessarily sitting back and reflecting and appreciating, but genuinely just enjoying.
mm,
Yeah.
I think that's it. And a lot of people do things that they really don't enjoy for a whole range of reasons. But to find the joy in the
Yep.
process has been a huge unlocker for me. Um, and yeah, I think is for me what keeps everything that I'm doing sustainable, and what means that, I hope, but I think we're likely to achieve our goals because we're just enjoying the process of getting there
Yep.
rather than looking at the end goal as kind of the destination.
makes it so much easier to put in the effort when it doesn't even feel like effort, right?
Exactly. When your work feels like fun or
Yep.
hanging out with a group of mates and it's genuinely as fun as, going to the pub on the weekend or, sport or whatever else you're doing, then that's when I think you're winning.
And you touched on a little bit of your journey there, but I kind of want to deep dive a little bit. And in order for us to understand how you have gotten to where you are today, I think it's important to go right back to your kind of early life and understand how you were shaped. Can you walk us through, your childhood and how especially you think your parents shaped who you became?
Yeah, absolutely. And I had a pretty unconventional upbringing, in that, so I'm a child of mining. My dad was a massive hippie back in the day, and then decided to scrub up and so he could marry my mum, and raise a family. And so he joined the mining industry. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, and kind of stayed there for the rest of his career. And so it meant we moved around a lot.
Mm.
And not necessarily in a glamorous way. Like my early childhood was set in very, very rural, remote towns in WA, and mining towns. We moved to New Zealand as well, which was really fun, and kind of our first, or my first taste of like a different kind of cultural environment. We lived in Indonesia for a couple of years, which I think in terms of my memory is almost like my formative years. And uh, we talk a lot about this as a family. It's interesting. I have an older brother and a younger brother, and my older brother was old enough to feel a little bit of disruption with the moving around. My
Yeah.
younger brother was very young, so he was just kind of happy, sitting wherever. But for me, I found it really exciting, and I got a lot of benefit out of it. But growing up where you're constantly asking your parents questions like, why are the roads in Australia so smooth, but the roads where we live here in Indonesia are so bumpy? From a child's perspective, just constantly comparing, constantly understanding, why people live this certain way, or what does being Muslim mean, or what does being Christian mean, and all of these different conversations that we were having, and just seeing different ways of life, learning different languages. Yeah, it really, I think that is what gave me this like curiosity about the world, and wanting to explore, but also wanting to understand these big things that shaped the way individual people lived their lives. Um, and so we settled in Perth, or south of Perth, and I went to a lot of primary school and high school there. And then as soon as I was able to, when I was 17, I moved to Japan for a year.
Wow.
Again, just wanting that like different, just that culture clash, and to understand something that was seemed so different to my everyday life. Um, and then moved straight to Melbourne afterwards, and I've been here ever since. It's a very fun city. But yeah, I think that that kind of upbringing, and having my parents be willing to kind of uproot and be brave and go, all right, great, we're going here now. Like, this is a really exciting adventure for us. Let's make the most of it. And, giving us those experiences and not trying to shelter us or kind of
Mm.
um, keep us too kind of wrapped in cotton wool was, yeah, I think a big part that shaped my, I guess,
Mhm.
paradigm.
Mhm.
And do you think like Australia is definitely, a bubble, and doing all that traveling around kind of opened you up to some of the inequity in the world as well? And do you think that kind of shaped why you've gotten into to Mobilize and, the issue of homelessness?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And throughout my entire career thus far, there hasn't been particularly long, but everything I've done, there's been an impact element to it, and I've
Mm.
always wanted to just understand how we can make things better, for people who can't necessarily do that themselves, and advocate for people who need support, and just essentially make society a better place. And I think again, there's an element of selfishness to that because you get that helper's high, and you can see the impact, and everybody wants to leave a positive impact in the world in some way. So being able to marry like skills and that impact side has always just been really fulfilling. And I could go and I could work for anywhere. Like, I have a broad set of skills, and I could sell bottled water, I could go into tech, I could do all of these different things. I could do, like, the world's our oyster,
Mhm.
really. But I think it's important to, whatever you do, have a positive kind of
Yeah.
outcome from it.
So where did you do your schooling, Daniel? Here in Australia or
Yeah.
Indonesia?
So did a bit of school in Indonesia, but most of it in WA. Um, I went to a College of the Arts in Fremantle in WA, which I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with
No, I've only
Fremantle.
been once.
It's a bit of like a hippie bohemian enclave, surrounded by the rest of WA. So again, I think just hearing a lot of the stories from my dad in particular, living and kind of like going to school surrounded by very creative people. Again, I was always just kind of really enjoying diving in and you know tearing ideas apart and understanding how different people lived and viewed the world. And it's just, yeah, it's so rich when you're surrounded by people who just think differently or operate differently. So yeah.
And I want to know how someone who grew up in that environment transitioned into management consulting, because to me that's very different.
I'm glad you called that out. Well, I mean, it's actually kind of like, in the same vein, I just really wanted to understand what role that played. And actually, it was so I went to uni in Melbourne. So I went to Japan, did a year of exchange there, came back to Melbourne, did my undergrad. I did a Bachelor of Arts, and I did international politics because, again, I was like, I want to understand these big systems that shape our everyday lives that you don't necessarily think of immediately. I found it so boring. I was far more interested in like socializing and partying, kind of, taking advantage of being in my early 20s, and the freedom that brings. And so when I graduated, I was like, what do I do? I just didn't feel focused enough. I didn't feel equipped to go and shape the rest of my life, and took a big gap year. Ended up doing a subject in India, through University of Melbourne called JAMCED, and met a bunch of people who were doing that, who were studying the Master of Public Health. Everything that we were talking about and everything that we were doing kind of married all of these things that I'd been most interested in, and kind of reflected, again, like all of those things that I was interested in my upbringing as well. And so I ended up enrolling and texting people on the first day of my master's, just being like, I'm here, like, this is exactly what I want to be doing, like, this is amazing. Um, and really, really loving that, and kind of really locking in. And I did really well in my studies and just kind of took a bit full advantage of all of it. And it just kind of set me off on the right track. But all of that is to say, in public health, you often view the private sector as kind of this like ambiguous and almost nefarious actor. Um, Public health is all about looking at prevention of disease across a population, and the things that influence disease. You know, you can talk about commercial interests like junk food, tobacco,
Hmm.
alcohol, even businesses and the way communities are set up and access to different things and commercial pressures like that. So you kind of, or even mining. I had some very interesting arguments around the dinner table with my dad while I was studying, looking at resource extraction and pretty much purely from a negative lens. Um, and so when I was getting closer to graduating, I was like, well, but the private sector is so powerful
Mhm.
and it's not just negative. Like
Yep.
it's just a lie. Like it's such a
Yep.
black and white lie. Like there's so much positive that comes from the private sector and so much influence that could be positive from the private sector. And so, um, yeah, I kind of made my way into management consulting to again just see what that was like and actually make my own decision about it, which I think is really important.
What was it like?
I had a lot of fun. I joined health sector advisory a month before COVID hit Australia. So you can
Wow.
imagine
Great timing. Yeah.
perfect, impeccable timing. But it was so interesting. And again, like for someone that was just so interested in understanding how as many different things interacted and you know, didn't necessarily have a specialty focus that I wanted to really lean into. I just wanted to soak up as much as possible and sitting across a whole industry in the way that like big consulting firms do. Like I was working on jobs with state government, federal government, non-profits from a whole range of different sectors, of course, private sector as well, and just seeing that bird's eye view of how things were moving was fascinating. And you put in a lot of work. You learn how to work really hard like and but that's what I wanted at that point in time and also probably the best thing for me throughout COVID so I wasn't just twiddling my thumbs but yeah that set me up like incredibly for the career that I'm building now.
And then what was the transition to We Are Mobilize? How did you kind of get from management consulting into this not for profit?
So I met our founder Noah when we were at KPMG together.
Oh,
So
right.
we were both in like so there's like an umbrella team that primarily dealt with like policy and government issues, which was where our teams sat like adjacent to each other, and we were part of the same graduate intake, and we just like we had this group of friends that I think we were trauma bonded with like graduates in in COVID, in the big four for the first time, just
Yeah.
kind of in the washing machine. And we still have really like that friendship group is like rock solid to this day, which is really nice. So yeah, we met there, and I had someone suggest considering kind of what I was interested in and where I wanted to go, and I wanted to explore a little bit of strategy. Um, and an old boss suggested that I have a look at volunteer board roles. She was like, you find a smallish organization and you get exposure to what it's like to actually be a director and run a company and kind of, stretch those strategy muscles. And so I reached out to Noah one day and just asked him, I know you're running Mobilize. Is there anyone in your network? Like, do you know of any organizations looking for volunteer board members or, a lot of boards want younger representation as well now for that diversity of thought. And so I was like, if anything pops up, just let me know. Um, and a couple of weeks later, he comes back to me and he's like, I actually think you should join us. We've got the perfect role. And so, yeah, I
So,
joined. And
uh, Danielle, people don't know anything about We Are Mobilize. Can you please take us through what's We Are Mobilize?
so we are Mobilize at our core. We're a homelessness charity. Um, but we really want to redefine the way social impact is seen and done in Australia. And we started very grassroots. So for 5 or 6 years, so Noah started Mobilize when he was 19,
Wow.
and it came out of an experience that a lot of people have, where walking down the street and you see someone sleeping rough, and you A, don't know what to do, but B, also just sitting there just thinking like, how does that happen in Australia?
Yep.
We are so lucky. It's such an incredible country. How does someone end up literally sleeping on the
Mm.
street? It just doesn't make logical sense. And so um, from that spark, he just started sitting with people, understanding their stories, connecting with people, and bringing more friends out. A lot of people sleeping rough, they obviously there are basic needs like food and money and those sorts of things, but really kind of two things came out of it, and all those conversations, and my conversations I had with people as well throughout those years. Um, People really need social connection. So no matter what you had to offer, people pretty much just wanted you to sit and chat,
Mm.
um, and just see them like a human being. And especially, you can imagine sleeping on the side of the street in a capital city. You have thousands of people walking past you every day, not even making eye contact, not looking at you, avoiding you, scared of you. Th- that element of it is such a huge part of the trauma of homelessness in and of itself. Um, but also that people want an opportunity, and they need an opportunity that's right for them, when they're ready for it. Um, and so across those years, we grew to a grassroots network in 5 states, of volunteer-led outreaches. So every couple of Sundays, going out for a couple of hours and taking young people who had all the enthusiasm and really want to help and really want to understand an issue like homelessness, but maybe haven't developed their skill set yet, and don't have a lot of money to donate or anything like that. But everyone's got a smile and everyone's got the
Mhm.
capacity to have a conversation with someone. And so it was just about giving particularly young people that opportunity to like break down walls in society and get to know people who they share their city with. Um, and then in 2022, so one of those young people who had an experience like that was Ned Brockman.
Yeah.
Um, and for those who aren't familiar, he's well, not anymore, but was a blonde mullet wearing Sparky. He was 23 at the time when he ran. Um, but long story short, ended up connecting with Noah, and he said, I want to raise $1 million for homelessness, and I want to run from Perth to Sydney to do it. Like, are you
Amazing.
guys in? And that was what we were all about, like young people just giving it a crack, getting involved, and kind of starting this movement. And so, yeah, Ned did just that. Ended up igniting an absolute movement across the country, or across the world, actually.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, it was an incredible thing to witness. And we saw like the impossible, or the seemingly impossible, become possible. And we saw ourselves just have this once in a lifetime opportunity to actually have a crack and solve this issue of homelessness. So now, Mobilize in its current form, we've developed a suite of direct giving programs where we get all those donor dollars directly into the hands of people who need it. We do this through a range of mechanisms: get people into housing, pay for rent and bonds, pull people out of arrears so they don't lose current housing and fall into homelessness as well. We also have Australia's first direct cash transfer program, where we actually provide cash directly to people over a 6-month period, so they can choose their own goals and determine their own next steps and their own futures, which is an incredible thing to see. And now we also provide employment to people as well through a partnership with Toll, which we're
All right.
expanding nationally. So financial support directly at the time when people need it, and then into employment to write that next chapter. So
That's amazing. That's
it's a
amazing.
very long-winded way of wrapping up everything that we're doing. But yeah, it's been a
Yeah.
really exciting story.
So, Danielle, how widespread is homelessness in Australia?
So there are over 122,000 people
Wow.
experiencing homelessness. Yeah. But I think the thing that shocks people the most is that um, when we think of homelessness, we think of someone, and usually it's like an older man drinking out of a brown paper bag on the side of the street. And that's just not the actual representation of homelessness in this country at all. It's very much a stereotype. People sleeping rough, so the people that you see on the side of the street, is actually only 6% of that 122,000. The other 94% are in what's called like secondary and tertiary homelessness. So primarily couch surfing in their cars, in boarding houses and temporary accommodation and hostels, and basically pure instability or really unsafe or overcrowded housing as well. Um, one of the biggest drivers of homelessness is domestic and family violence.
Mm.
So it's very much a problem of hidden homelessness. That 94% is actually not who we're seeing on the street. So it's extremely hidden, but it's also due to things that are so far beyond personal control. A lot of people just kind of put it down to personal choices and drug and alcohol, and actually it's a failure of social networks. It's a failure of people having people around them to care for them and to lean on and support them throughout really dark times. So
Mm.
if you start to pick away at it, homelessness is it's not as far away from you as you might expect.
Yeah, this is a very close to my heart, this topic, homelessness, because I want to share this story a little bit. 1990, I came here as an international student, and that was during uh, a very large recession. Couldn't get a job because I was supposed to work part time and
Mm,
pay for my school fees and etc. But I couldn't do that, so I had to travel to Sydney. So I don't know whether I could class as a homelessness person, but I was pretty much every weekend. Friday, I came to Sydney, work throughout Saturday, Friday night, Saturday night, and then Sunday. I
mm,
kind of share a bench or something under, uh, you know, Harbour Bridge or somewhere, just walking around. And during that time, I had the opportunity to talk to so many homeless people as well,
mm.
and got to know them very well as well, and actually met few good friends as well. I mean, this is a really interesting topic. That's why I want to reach out to Noah and you guys just to get you on to this podcast. And yeah, just to understand a bit more about homelessness and any way that we can contribute to your cause as well.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's so important that people, I mean, when they're comfortable to share those experiences, to remove that stereotype and stigma and say like this is just something that it just shouldn't happen in society. Like we
Mm.
should have systems and we should have support networks that mean that people don't have to go through those experiences. But also, if you do go through that, that doesn't define you, and that doesn't mean that you should be judged
Yeah.
or that you did anything wrong. Like in that situation, you were doing the absolute best that you could do in that moment and setting up this life. And obviously you've got a beautiful family now, and you've made that work in Australia, and that's a success story. So it's kind of, yeah, understanding the nuance of these experiences, housing instability and
Yep.
homelessness, is so important. So um, yeah, I didn't realize that about you, but thank you for sharing.
And it's all about having these conversations. And you mentioned you've had the ability to chat with a lot of homeless people throughout the work that you've been doing. Are there
Mm.
any stories that really have stuck and have made you think about either the issue of homelessness or the impact that Mobilize is having?
So many, so many. I think like it's always so when we go on outreaches or when we're even just chatting to people on the side of the street, the things that stand out most are, and I think our brains are hardwired to be really attracted to the negative, right?
Mm.
Like people
Yep.
people hear someone's, the tragedy that they go through, and that can really, really stick with you. And there are so many stories that people share that are just that really make you sit there and go like, what kind of society do we live in? Like, this is so unfair. And it's a genuine tragedy that we have people going through what they do every day. But what always really, really sticks out is just the positivity as well, and
Mm.
the beauty that that you can that those beautiful moments that you can share with people on the street, and the realization that, like, I have spoken to everyone from people, in all forms of homelessness, obviously everyday people throughout my friends and family in my life, to CEOs, to multimillionaires, to literal billionaires, and to understand that, like, everyone is represented at every
Mm.
layer. And often the conversations I've had with people on the streets have been so much richer and so much more positive than some of those other conversations with people who might have everything. Um, and that's something that always really sticks with me. It's like, it's so much, life is what you make it. And I
Mm,
think this kind of comes
absolutely.
back to my definition of success, where, like, it's that framing, it's that ability to just be like, I like you're approaching something in a positive or negative light. And we heard Ned speak a couple of days ago at the Tech Council of Australia, and he said the same thing, where if something's happening, it's us that puts a spin of
Mm.
whether it's negative or positive onto it.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are, like, terrible things that can happen to people, but in the general sense, in everyday life, you can choose to be happy or sad about something, or you can choose for something to be hard or for it not to be hard, and just decide that you're gonna put one foot in front of the other and get through it. And some of the most uplifting conversations I've had with people on the street. Um, there's also there was this beautiful moment when we were running the pilot of our direct cash transfer program. So it's called Mobilize Matched, and essentially we were providing up to $10,000 to people over the course of 6 months, and we were doing, like, financial literacy workshops and goal setting workshops, and basically trying to set people up for success and say, like, you have your goals. This money is a tool for you to be
Yeah.
able to build the life you want and reach those goals, whatever they may be. You're worth it. And there's no other organization in Australia that is going to give someone enough money to actually go and do the
Mm.
things that they're dreaming about and whatnot. So we're running this pilot, and the 10 young people, so all under 25, and we're going through like Maslow's hierarchy of needs or something. And I'm sitting there going like, all right, so we pay our rent, and then we might pay for, something we want to do, and then, festival tickets or whatever might be up here, blah blah, like, just really basic stuff. And in a lot of charities, they do financial literacy, they do budgeting, because everyone wants you to do a budget. Everyone assumes that it's a lack of financial literacy that's holding people
Yeah.
back rather than other things. But people, by and large, know exactly how to meet their needs and manage their money in a pretty decent way. So it's a really flawed assumption. But basically, we're going through this, and when one of these girls puts up her hands and she's like, "That's this is all useful, and, like, it's been interesting." She's like, "But I just don't have any money."
Yeah.
And it was this moment where it was like, that's exactly why we
Yeah.
developed this program. Like, if you have no money, and they're constantly dealing with trade-offs.
Yeah.
They're constantly living week to week, and
Yeah.
just, like, you can't get ahead. You can't, if you think about how expensive it is to be poor. Um, like, you can't engage in any of the wealth building, cost
Yeah.
saving strategies that we all might think of. It's like, you can't do that if you're literally every week back at zero.
Yeah.
And so that's one of my favorite stories in terms of, like, the Mobilize journey. We were like, and this is why we're doing
Yeah.
it. We're doing it for you, so we can not only teach you, all these theoretical things that apparently are going to change your life, but we're actually going to give you the means to go ahead and do those things and live your own life in the way that you need to. So
Yeah.
that was a really kind of validating moment
Yeah.
for us.
That's interesting. And also, you don't realize, right? Any of us can be homeless.
Mm,
Just like that.
Yeah, just like that, right?
mm,
When you talk to some people, you realize, they are not just because a lot of people think homeless people, they could be, they are mentally ill people, or some sort of, they're very poor people. Not necessarily, right? So
mm.
I had conversation with some people, like, ex-professor from university,
Yeah,
like, is very, very smart guy. Conversation is so good, you know,
yeah,
s- uh, you know, you realize, any minute,
Yeah, we could lose it all.
yeah, we could
yeah,
lose it all.
yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's again what something that is that safety net are those strengths of those relationships around you. The strengths of your relationships with family, friends in a position to look out for you and you can lean on when you need. Um, and that's often what, people don't have. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Daniel, how do you solve homelessness in Australia?
So essentially, we are we are in a very fortunate position because of the way that we have um, been fundraising throughout the last few years. We have untied funding, and so that's important to call out because a lot of organizations, they're if they're completely funded by government, for example,
Yeah.
you're beholden to these
Mm.
to what you've planned and set out to do, and there's a very different appetite for risk and innovation. It's much harder to move quickly, and so what we've done with our untied funding through these campaigns and what Australia has trusted us with is we've stood back and we've said, okay, there's this incredible network of organizations around the country, who are already providing those frontline services. So, someone can present to a charity and they can have their legal help, maybe they need medical help, mental health, help navigating the housing system, and then they can often get to the point of getting a housing opportunity, but what's often the missing link is just that really rapid, like adequate funding to go, okay, great, and here's some money to actually move into that house, and start your next chapter. And so that's essentially what we're unlocking at the moment. We are here to innovate and try different methods of very directly working with the sector to get people into housing at that critical time, and kind of move out of that 94%, prevent being falling into homelessness or into more extreme homelessness, and take advantage of the housing opportunities that we currently have and free up the rest of the sector so that they can move the people with more complex needs
Mm-hmm.
into the supports that they have and really focus on working with that potentially that 6%. So that's what we're doing kind of very practically, but ultimately, if we build the systems and if we continue innovating and adding to what works and trying new things, we want to change 10,000 lives between now and 2030. So our hypothesis is we can solve homelessness as a sector. What we need to do is build the systems to, if we can change 10,000 lives and prove that these methods work and pull that many people out, we will have led to enough of a systems change, to actually get that done for the other 100,000. So it's really about kind of innovation, pushing things forward, making the most of what we have while we're waiting for additional housing stock, and kind of more efficiently working together as a sector.
And how much of it is getting people who are currently homeless out of homelessness, and how much of it is prevention? Because I think of, if we think long term into the future, it's such a systematic issue. How do we solve it, not just now, but make sure it doesn't keep happening and popping its head up in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I mean, as you know, I've got a public health background, and there's that quote, prevention is better than cure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's something that we see a lot with our work. And it's preventing people from getting into the system. And so it's about an even split in terms of what we've seen so far. We've had 500 participants through programs, and a lot of those people are just needing to kind of exit out of the experience of homelessness. But a lot of people are just, what they really need is that little kickstart and that kind of push in the right direction. And they've experienced a crisis or something like that,
Mm.
and it's kind of preventing them from falling into that system. Because you're right, as soon as someone becomes entrenched in homelessness, it can take years and years before the system can actually kind of support them out.
Mm.
Um, and so, I mean, you always need both. If you think of, health as an analogy, you need cures and you also
Yeah.
need prevention. But obviously, there's a lot more kind of efficiency and higher return on investment, if you want to use that term, from preventing people from becoming homeless, for sure.
Do you think it's something that will always be left to the private markets to solve, or do you think there is changes that can be made structurally to solve this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, with all the conversation around cost of living and housing affordability, every single layer of society has a role to play in this. If we think of, policy shifts that are happening, if you think of legislation that can come in and change kind of a landscape, if you think of private sector, obviously, there's a lot of private actors, and not even just housing, in terms of contributing to homelessness organizations and community building initiatives, and that CSR that we're seeing and that investment into communities is really positive. And then you have down to, individual communities and looking out for one another and understanding, oh, if that person's sleeping rough and we know who they are,
Mm.
like making sure we're understanding what services and supports are available, what we might be able to do. And then to an individual level, it can be something as simple as literally sitting down, buying someone a cup of coffee, getting to
Mm.
know them, understanding their story, and making them feel seen and heard and supported, without trying to,
Yeah.
necessarily meddle or fix anything. Every single person in society has a role they can play.
So, do you believe having this communication about the homelessness is such an important thing?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think again, it's once we better understand an issue, you can better solve it.
Yeah.
And so we're doing a lot of work with trying to educate the general public, or make this known that homelessness is so much more than, as I said, that older man drinking out of a brown paper bag,
Yeah.
sitting on the side of the street.
Mm.
That is not the extent of homelessness. And once
Absolutely.
people understand more about, the mother and the child fleeing domestic violence, sleeping in a car, or couch surfing with friends, and getting to a point where they don't feel comfortable, they're overstaying their welcome, or it not being viable anymore, and then sleeping in the car, and then
Mm.
trying to find a hostel. When people understand that, then you get more empathy, you get more people interested in contributing to actually changing those situations, or donating, or raising awareness amongst their friends and family. And that's how we can tackle these problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about, I suppose it's about like removing that stigma as well. As you mentioned, it's all about just sitting down and having that conversation, or buying that cup of coffee and realizing, they're just another person as well, who,
Mm.
Yeah.
by something potentially out of their control, have ended up where they are today. But I
Yeah.
suppose, we've spoken a lot about homelessness as a whole, but I kind of want to go back to your journey and its influence on you. Now kind of all this work that you guys have done as an organization. How do you think it's shaped kind of your perspective, your view on life as well?
That's a very good question, because there's there's a lot, like, you kind of see the worst of society in some ways.
Mhm.
um, and it's it's important to understand that these things happen and they're going on, and again, kind of making sure that you're aware of what people go through. It can There have been times when it's made me really question kind of who we are as a society, and get a bit down. But ultimately, the thing that has really, I guess, been the takeaway, as I mentioned earlier, is that you also see the beauty in society, and to be able to meet so many people who are so passionate about helping others, or people who are just incredibly reflective, thoughtful, kind, who have every reason to hate the world, is
Mm.
also just incredible. And one of the most tangible ways that this presents itself, and what kind of keeps me optimistic in humanity, is that a lot of the people who go through these experiences, they they often say to us, I really want to start a program for, single dads. I want to start a program for young people, from my community. I want to give back. I want to do social work. I want to they
Yeah.
actually they want to go. It's not like they're going, oh, thank God, I'll leave that behind and just, go. It's like people who've been through that are so inclined to help others.
Mm.
And that's the beautiful part. It's kind of like, it's making me very hopeful that our baseline as a species is like empathy, and again, wanting to have that positive impact really at the end of the day, and see other people thrive.
When you get where you're going, don't forget to turn back around.
Yep, exactly. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose, you've worked in a very diverse kind of career. How have you found it running a not for profit compared to, when you were doing consulting for, these bigger kind of corporations?
It's a lot more, impact's a lot more tangible.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people crave. You can be working in a really large organization, and you feel like your contribution is a drop in a bucket. Or in the case of something like consulting, it can be rare where you actually see the outcome of your work. You see the output,
Mm.
but you don't often see the outcome. You don't see that implementation. You don't check back in 3 years later, or at least at more junior levels. It can be just a very much like churn and go. Um, and so that's probably the thing that I'm enjoying the most, is that if you push something in a startup sense, if you push something, you see something move.
Yeah.
Um, and you can also work very quickly. So it's very it's a very empowering being in the driver's seat, and saying, there's nothing over here. We're going to build something. And
Yeah.
it's that magic of entrepreneurship that I never really knew existed, where, creating something from nothing is, again, tapping into something deep, like primal, I guess, in human nature, where, yeah, it's been so much fun to build, um, and to, attract this beautiful group of people in our team who also just really want to run 100 kilometers an hour in that direction, and really, really have this vision in mind of a society where, homelessness isn't what it is today.
Yep.
So it's been a lot of fun. It's hard. It's really hard. Um, the hardest part, I think, is constantly being on the edge of your sphere of competence,
Yeah.
Mm.
or constantly being completely out of your comfort zone. Um, it's something that you really have to work out to, well, at least for me, remind myself that this is literally what it's about. If you're not like growth feels like this, it's scary, can be stressful, but again, if you enjoy that process and you actually sit back and you're like, this is wild. What a wild life I lived, that I'm in this room, or that I'm talking
Mm.
to these people, or that, I'm overseeing this tech build, or, whatever it might be. That's what keeps it fun and energetic. But yeah, I'd be lying if I said it's not a
Challenging.
scary thing. Yeah, really challenging. We are constantly in bigger and bigger rooms, or the stakes get higher and higher and higher. Yeah.
I never even thought about the fact that, you guys are a startup. I, you're kind of competing with a lot of the big guys, but I always think about, charity as very kind of large organizations who, a little bit slow to move, and have been around for forever. But you guys kind of burst onto the scene and hit the ground running 100 miles an hour. And I
Mhm.
think that's largely been due to your innovation in the way you're trying to execute. So I want to know from like your perspective, how important has that kind of innovative mindset been to changing what I would say is, kind of a traditional industry?
Yeah, definitely. And that's interesting to hear from an outside like reflection, kind of looking in, because I, ultimately what drives us is the fact that we owe it to people going through these situations or going through these experiences to try whatever we can
Yeah.
to actually to solve the problem and to support them. So that when we hold that in mind, it makes it very easy and it doesn't feel like this kind of structured process of in or intentional innovation. It's just literally like, well, let's look at what's going on. We have all these incredible supports. The rate of homelessness is either rising or stagnating every
Mm.
year. Clearly, we need something new, and so let's do it. Like, let's be that. Like, and it takes bravery. We when we were talking about standing up our first program, that Mobilize Match program I mentioned, we were giving people cash over 6 months. Noah and I, we drew on a small but growing international evidence base, and we looked in Australia and we saw that no one was doing it, and we were like, well, why not? This seems so like such a sensible approach to trying to actually build the evidence base here and see what new things might work, and push the dial in the right direction. And we spoke with a few people. Pretty much everyone was like, "Oh God, why no? Why would you do that? The risks this, the risks that." We spoke to one academic who was like, basically said all the same things, and then was like, even if you wanted to do it, it's going to take you 4 years to stand up. Um, and all of this was just so much fire in the belly because we were like,
Yeah.
well,
Watch us.
yeah, like literally, all right, great, thank you for your opinion.
Yeah.
And can we try this responsibly? Yes, and therefore we owe it to the people who we're talking about, who are actually here to support, and this problem that we're trying to solve, to just try it rather than think ourselves out of it and think ourselves around in circles and try and come up with the safest, most perfect, well designed, T's crossed, I's dotted. It's like, well, why don't we actually just get in there and try it? And
Yeah.
we'll find out far quicker than any kind of, you know, 3 year build or design process will get us, like we need to actually just try these things. And so, yeah, that's been the guiding philosophy for all of our work. Again, it's kind of like it's very reminiscent of like the quest for the cure for cancer.
Mm.
There's so much investment into that space. There's so much innovation. There's so much research. There's so many trials. People are racing to find this cure. Have we found it yet? No. That doesn't mean there's a tacit understanding in the community that it's worth everything we put into finding it.
Mm.
And that's how we want homelessness to be seen. It should be seen that way. And
Yeah.
in Australia, we have 122,000 people experiencing homelessness, which is unacceptable. But in the grand scheme of things, it's solvable.
Yeah.
122,000 people is nothing
No.
compared to in some other like a context like the US. So we can have a crack at it, and we need to make sure that everybody understands that not only it's worth it, but it's going to take trial and error, it's going to take innovation, it's going to take every single person supporting and understanding that mission. So that's
And
that's what
and
we're really trying to build.
and how important do you think? I know Ned was, a young guy, and he got involved and he's kind of grown with you guys. But how important do you think his journey, being aligned with yours, has really helped Mobilize? Because he's kind of grown a cult-like following for you guys as well. It's opened up the issue to a whole new generation. My generation knows about homelessness now because
Mm.
of Ned and
Absolutely.
the word that he's spreading.
Yeah.
And how important do you think Ned has been to the Mobilize journey?
It's an integral part of our story. You know, he has been the catalyst for so much. And I think when it really comes down to it, he has just shown that no matter who you are,
Mm.
if you really care about something and you want to do something about it, do what you say you're going to do. Just just get out there and do it. You don't have to be, like in his case, you don't have to be a professional runner to
Yeah,
go, you know what, I'm gonna run from Perth to Sydney. And and I think that's been this supercharging of this message where, young people, we want to push things forward. And an issue like homelessness can feel like this, thing that's been around forever, and people kind of just assume it's always been the case. It's like, well,
Mm.
no, why should that be the case? And every single person, everyone can be their own version of Ned, for
yeah,
lack of a better way of putting it. If you care about something, just run at it at full pace and see what happens, because you could end up changing the world. And
absolutely.
the only people that change the world are the people who act on their ideas and see them through. Ideas are free. You can go to any pub and hear a million business ideas, or a million, like,
Yep,
ideas are
love
free.
it.
It's only the people who actually go, yeah, all right, I'm all in, and they actually show up every single day, and do that thing. So that, I think, is, an incredible force, an incredible, wind to have behind us, in the form of Ned, and what he's able to inspire in people.
Yep.
And if that translates to people being inspired to join us in the mission, to solve homelessness, it's
Yeah.
incredible. It's only a win for society. So yeah.
So how do you join Mobilize? What can you do to contribute to Mobilize journey?
So, coming up very soon, we have a Ned's Uncomfortable Challenge that we run every year. And so, if you want to test your limits and see what you're made of, do something uncomfortable every day for 10 days. It can be anything. We have everyone from, obviously, endurance athletic feats, running marathons a day, all those sorts of wild things. But it can also be very personal. So one of our team members, Frishi, he's doing 10 days of stand-up improv comedy. um, he's not a comedian. He's never done it before. And everyone's like, oh, when they hear that, like, that's a terrifying thought for so many people. But he's going to stand up there and he's going to bomb for 10 days in a row. But we have people, sleeping in tents, living on, like $8 a day. We have people doing all sorts of things. But whatever it is for you, when you face that discomfort head on, you realize life isn't so scary. You hit day 6 or 7, the novelty's worn off, and you're like, oh, is anyone even watching? Maybe I'll just skip this. Oh, yeah. If you keep your word to yourself, and after 10 days, you're not an entirely different person, like, yeah, you've done it wrong. Like, it's an incredible experience. So on a personal note, but also obviously you're able to fundraise for Mobilize through that, and contribute directly to the cause. That's the most near term thing that's coming up, and something I think everyone should experience at least once.
Absolutely, it's a good one too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll drop the link down below for people to sign up for Ned's Uncomfortable Challenge. And I suppose, Danielle, kind of wrapping this conversation up, what do you want your legacy to be? Like, how do you want to be remembered?
Um, I think I'd love to be remembered as someone who pulled no punches. Like, I want to be remembered as someone who never dimmed their light for anyone and just went for it. Um, for better or worse, but I want to be that person that I say I am. And I think that's something that, yeah, that's something that would make me very happy.
And I suppose looking back on this incredible journey that we've been speaking about, do you feel successful given that your definition was largely around, making sure every day you're having fun, you're feeling stimulated, and feeling like you're having impact?
It's funny because I don't know if it's a weird like tall poppy thing or something, but I'm like, oh, it feels strange to be like, yes, I am successful. But in terms of my definition, like yeah, I feel like I've achieved that state of joy, that beautiful kind of intersection of joy, purpose, fulfillment, challenge. I feel like I've won the lottery. Yeah, every day.
It's
Absolutely,
amazing.
and I think you should. I mean, it comes through the screen as well. Your joy is emanating through the screen. So this conversation has been incredible. I'm really glad that we got to sit down and have this chat. But before we let you go, I've been kind of jotting down the core traits which I think have been really integral to your successful life, and I'd like to share them with you. I think the first one is your curiosity. You mentioned it early on. You always want to know how things happen and why they happen, and you like dig really deep into to get into like the real structural and fundamental understanding of why these things are happening. And I think that really led you to your mission at Mobilize, understanding, wait, homelessness shouldn't be an issue, especially here in Australia. Why is it an issue? What can we do to help? And I think that kind of curiosity has driven you a lot throughout your career journey, and definitely gotten you to where you are today. The next one, I think, is definitely the biggest one, and it's your passion. Work is clearly effortless to you. Just throughout the conversation, when you're telling stories about the work that Mobilize has done, you could just see your face light up, and you clearly enjoy the work that you do. And it's not just work, it's impact as well. And that's the next one that I want to touch on, is you're very much impact driven. It's about, what can I contribute? What can I give back? And so I'm really glad that we got to sit down and have this conversation, because it's been very insightful, not just on the homelessness front, but also understanding about your journey as well, Danielle.
Thank you. No, it's really nice to have those played back. And yeah, it's been a really, really good exercise, kind of trying to peel back the layers and see where it all comes from. But yeah, thank you so much. I just hope that we can inspire other people to
Absolutely.
find their definition of success. And I think what you're doing is an incredible asset to the community. It looks so different for everyone. And if everyone just kind of unshackled a little bit and calmed down and really just dove into what they enjoy, I think the world would be a little bit better.
Thank
Absolutely.
you, Daniel.
It's all about having those conversations. And so we really appreciate your time. And if people want to learn more about Mobilize, where can they find a bit more info?
All socials at We Are Mobilize, wearemobilize.org.au. Or you can get in touch with me directly as well. I'm always keen to chat about what we're doing, as you can see.
Awesome. And with that, if you guys have enjoyed today's episode, it would mean the world if you could like and subscribe and share this with your network, so that we can spread the message that we're trying to spread. And you can see all of our inspiring content over at our website, thequestforsuccesspodcast.com. And with that, we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.